You are watching CIOTV by Enterprise IT World, a production of Accent Infomedia.
Till the time it is being figured out, I'm Rohit Sharma. I take care of the pre-sales for SAARC region for Micron. I'm joined by my colleague Sanjio. He takes care of the enterprise as well as the commercial business. Again, you would have seen that semiconductor industry is going through a turmoil, and primarily there was a huge shift in the kind of demand that we were seeing in different kind of verticals, and which is why a lot you would have seen from a demand or supply crunch perspective earlier. All that we'll be covering in this particular session. What semiconductor trends are going on at this particular point in time, and we'll tie it back primarily to the data center market, because this is a data center event. Although we cater to the entire gamut, be it any device, primarily it will require just three components. It should be a processor, it should be memory, and storage. Just three things would become the main or the core components out of any device. All that we'll be covering in this particular session, and then we'll tie it back to the data center market. So it's a short presentation, but do stop me wherever you want to know anything or any question you have, primarily from either semiconductor industry perspective, data center perspective, the growth that we are seeing from the industry or the data center market perspective, and the kind of products that we typically get to in the data center industry, and how that will typically grow in the current semiconductor dynamics that we are seeing. Okay, I'll keep it more closer. So just from an agenda perspective, we'll just see a brief glimpse of what Micron is, the kind of brands that we carry, where those brands are typically used in. The semiconductor trends throughout the presentation, we'll be seeing the semiconductor trends that are going through in the market, and there is a huge turmoil that is going in the entire semiconductor industry, and the impact that it typically has on the different verticals that we operate in. Then we'll see a bit of portfolio that we cater primarily from a data center perspective, and throughout the presentation you'll see how Micron can help in the data center transformation, whether you want to create a more scalable, more performing, more energy efficient, less power and cooling you'll be requiring in your data center. How in all that scenarios Micron would be able to help you. Just a brief glimpse of what Micron is all about. We are the fourth largest semiconductor company. This is by revenue. Not many people actually knew when I talked to them, which is why I just wanted to highlight that we are the fourth largest semiconductor company in the world. There are 12 manufacturing sites, and only one out of them is in China. Rest all are spread across. And most of the stuff that comes in, whether it is from SSD or DRAM perspective that comes in India, is either from Singapore, Malaysia, Taiwan, nearer sites, and US as well. Then we are operating in 17 countries. Last year, we clocked almost $27.7 billion revenue, and we are 35th on the Fortune 500 list. Kind of from a patent standpoint perspective, we have just crossed the 50,000 mark as well now from a patent standpoint perspective, and there are 44,000 team members we have worldwide. And in India itself as well, we are 3,000 strong now. Our R&D in Hyderabad as well as in Bangalore. We have a huge team. The sales team might be pretty small, just 12 people, but the R&D guys Micron has employed is humongous now in India. We are the #1 employer in Singapore. Kind of a huge space we had on one side of the road in Singapore, and Singapore government has donated us a similar space in another side of the road, and that huge fab facility we have built out there in Singapore as well. And much of the stuff that we create, the latest 3D NAND, much of it in India as well as worldwide, it comes from Singapore only. Although we are fourth largest semiconductor company in the world, still we are #1 in the major markets, wherever quality, reliability, availability is of utmost concern. Like in the automotive market, no other place you can have fatal kind of accidents, which is why automotive requires highest kind of reliability, availability, and therein we are catering to all the standards applicable, AEC Q100, all the other standards that automotive industry requires. We are catering to that. The different kind of temperature ranges, the entire broad portfolio should be there. We have for it. From highest performance standpoint perspective, the networking market, the graphics market, where user experiences of critical nature, and you'll not care too much about just money, and you require the highest kind of performance, like in gaming segment. And in the graphics segment, in all segments, typically we are number one. There are two brands typically we carry. The NAND that we make is the same. The processor and other stuff typically is the same. From a supply chain and the end customer perspective, we have divided them into the two brands that we carry. Crucial is primarily our aftermarket brand, a consumer brand. You buy your laptop or desktop from HP, Dell, or any typical vendor, and then you can upgrade those SSDs and DRAM in that primarily through the Crucial brand. Micron is our enterprise class brand. Within Micron as well, we have our client SSDs, and those are typically our client SSDs which go into HP, Dell when they purchase them from us and sell the end product as laptop, desktop to you. That typical segment is taken care by the Micron brand. The entire data center market, whether it is SSD or DRAM, the entire data center industry is catered by the Micron brand only. Now, there are multiple industries that our NAND gets divided into. This is through our latest update that Sanjay Mehrotra recently presented in our investor outlook in the recent presentation. Data center being our maximum bit share, kind of 30% we are giving from a bit share perspective from the NAND that we create to data center market, and we want to take it to almost 42%, which is why we require your support so that we are able to give more and more NAND to the data center. The recent numbers that we quoted to the industry were almost 6 million wafers we create, and out of that 6 million wafer, we will have to divide it into any of these verticals. And the more you are able to work with us and we are able to forecast to our company, therein that particular segment will get more and more NAND bits, and the other will definitely be starving. Every year, some or the other will be shining more. They'll be having much more demand, like in a COVID timeframe, mobile and PC, they definitely were selling like hotcakes, which is why a lot of demand was there. Auto was pretty much silent. And just last year, I read a report that $210 billion was the lost sales of automotive industry alone, just because of semiconductor shortage. All that pent-up demand will now come in this year, and auto will be shining this year, which is why we want you all to work with us so that we can forecast where all the bits should be going in this particular industry. From a overall standpoint perspective in a data center, like Mr. Sanjay was just highlighting, server is a major cost. And once you are moving from a server SAN and then storage architecture to a server SAN kind of architecture, server cost becomes a most prominent cost within the data center. Secondly, power and cooling costs are there, the other infrastructure that you'll require for power and cooling, and the power draw itself as well. In all that perspective, we'll be able to help you out. In any kind of device, definitely these three components only are required, and we are only catering to just two of them. But just to tell you the kind of exposure we have to the customers that we have, this is a server. Out of the server, we are controlling the flash drives, SSD, as well as the DRAM. The only other component that we do not control is the processor. In a storage heavy kind of configuration, I have typically seen that 70% of the cost of a server is controlled by Micron, SSD and DRAM put together. The only left out portion is processor, and rest of the peripheral is minimal cost only, which is why there is a huge cost that lies with Micron, which is the reason why data center companies should be talking to Micron. Now, this is the innovation timeline, and we have innovated a lot. Although we have been there in the semiconductor industry from last 40 years, but we have been earlier in the earlier time frame, our competitors were pretty much either ahead of us or in line with us. But from last almost 2020 or 2018, I can say, we have overtaken the industry from an innovation standpoint perspective. We were the first one to launch a lot of different products that I'll be specifying in the later on slides. And we have almost 3 to 4 quarter lead. Not all NAND is created equally, which is why There is a cost differentiation. And just to highlight that, I'll move on to the next slide. And this is just one factor wherein I'm highlighting that 176 layer 3D NAND, what change it can bring to you as an end customer. Although you might buy an SSD, it could be built on any technology, whether it could be using a 64 layer NAND, 96 layer NAND. At times we may not care, but the advantage that we are bringing to you after we moved from, typically when we launched this product, most of the industry was either at 64 layer 3D NAND or 96 layer 3D NAND. We directly launched 176 layer 3D NAND, and the advantage that that comes along with this was 30% smaller die, reads and write latencies were improved by 35%, and on top of that 33% more transfer rate, which means more bandwidth, which means the kind of product that we will be creating will be having the highest kind of performance, which is why 9300 series which we created had highest kind of performance level at that particular point in time. Later on, we launched so many other products that I'll be highlighting in the later on slides. And then you will see that how this innovation is translating on a lower TCO as well as higher performance or more consolidation you will be able to do in your data center through Micron products. Now, these are the semiconductor trends. There are a lot of customers ask us why the price is high. Although the data center demand is going down, you are talking to all the other data center guys. You know about data center demand is going down, but why the prices are going high in a semiconductor industry from an SSD and DRAM perspective? Because of all these primary reasons, because we cater to multiple segments. It could be that some other segment is driving NAND demand much higher than the data center industry. Possibly because of that, the prices are going high. The prices could be going high because of the geopolitical dynamics. There is a shortage. Ukraine was giving us the entire semiconductor industry, not just us, noble gases. That is in a crunch right now. There is a lot of industry consolidation going on. One of the major SSD makers worldwide, they sold off their SSD business to another competitor of theirs, our competitor as well. That guy also spun it out and created another company and did not merge it in their own SSD business as well. That kind of thing is going on in the semiconductor industry. There were COVID concerns as well. There is a Gen 3 to Gen 4 to Gen 5 transition also happening. I'll be highlighting more in the later on slides, how you can actually benefit. And while working with us, you can exactly know whether a Gen 3 drive would be best for you, Gen 4 drive would be best for you, and when Gen 5 would come. Kind of 2 years at least, Gen 5 SSDs will take. Whatever Gen 5 ports are coming at this particular point in time, they'll have non-storage kind of use cases, GPU kind of use cases. At least 2 years it will take for the Gen 5 to become mainstream. And then another trend that is happening is small form factor is growing big time. And there is much more higher capacity required in a smaller footprint, more from a PC standpoint perspective. And then value NVMe from a data center perspective will be growing way higher than the performance NVMe segment. At least in India, till last year, we were selling performance NVMe much more than the value NVMe. At least from this year onwards, we will see that value NVMe will outgrow performance NVMe by a big margin. And then again, in the low-cost PC segment, UFS as well as eMMC is coming in. There are multiple players who cater to one or the other segment of the entire semiconductor industry, but we are the player who is catering to the entire kind of use cases, whether it is there in PC, desktop, or any other kind of segment as well. Now, this is just from a data center standpoint perspective. There are multiple products that we cater to. CXL will become mainstream only in 2025 timeframe, although we are working with all the major vendors regarding that. We are a leader in GDDR5, GDDR6, GDDR6X, NVIDIA's and other customers. Typically, whatever you are buying from them, the underlying technology comes from Micron only. This year, and for few years to come, DDR4 tail will be pretty long. DDR4 will continue to persist, but from next year onwards, DDR5 will become mainstream. More than half of the market will transition from a data center perspective to DDR5, and we want to be partnering with you in your journey. We are the #1 player in DDR5. We launched it in the first place. We are already there in the desktop segment. We are #1 out there as well. Once Intel launches Sapphire Rapids, we are already testing with all the particular major players out there. And in case you want to test, definitely you can get in touch and we'll facilitate that particular testing with Sapphire Rapids as well. From an SSD standpoint perspective, I'll be discussing in later on slides. But just to highlight the fact that there were multiple kind of hard disk drives that I learned. I come from EMC, Hitachi, 3PAR, HP kind of background. And in all those organizations a decade ago, whenever I was working, I had to create a tiering kind of solution. 2% only SSDs, rest were 15K RPM drive, 10K RPM drive, then 7.2K RPM kind of drives, a tiering solution with 4 kind of tiers being created. And there is a caching tier up as well, 5th tier being created. We launched this 5210 drive primarily to counter the dollar per GB of a 10K RPM drive. We launched it 3 years back. 15K RPM drive, any which ways is not selling. Dollar per GB 3 years ago also, we were able to match almost similar level with Micron 5210 drive. And the kind of capacities we will be launching soon will be way humongous than the entire hard disk drive can think of. They typically, our hard disk drive is moving 18 TB, 20 TB, 22 TB. 15 terabyte is mainstream for us right now. Within this year, we will be launching kind of 30 terabyte capacity. And by next year, you'll see almost double of that, 60 terabyte kind of capacity. So you can think how much consolidation you will be able to do in a particular server. Way high. Even today, if you want to create a server, very dense configuration, then a 2U server can have 24 number of 7450 disk drive. So that will be almost 360 terabyte. And if you take the highest kind of capacity available in hard disk drive, 22 terabyte kind of drive, only 12 you can put in a 2U server, because it is a 3.5-inch drive, hard disk drive, and our drive is 2.5-inch. Entire semiconductor industry makes 2.5-inch drives only, which is why we can put in double the number of drives in a 2U server, 24 against 12 drives that hard disk drive can put. Which is why we can put in 360 terabyte, they can only put 260 terabyte. So kind of dense solution if you want to create, we already have the edge. Sooner or later, you'll see that we will be having an edge from the capacity standpoint perspective on a dollar per GB level. Right now, we are not there. Only from a performance standpoint perspective, an SSD makes sense from an ROI TCO perspective. Soon, that also will get changed. And a lot of capacity will be able to take from hard disk drive. Then one drive only. This is why I have made it green. Throughout the presentation, I'm not focusing on products too much, but if one drive you can remember, that drive should be 7450 that you should remember out in my presentation. This is the latest Gen 4 NVMe SSD that we launched on 176-layer 3D NAND. Now, this is just a report that I recently read, Gartner as well as Wells Fargo. What they are saying is kind of at a 2022 level, kind of 20% market is only there with us right now. Although from a overall standpoint perspective, we are losing out on 80% market that is still with hard disk drive, and we will soon catch it up, which is why a huge market share we have. And later on, we'll be covering this up. This entire market, so a huge market share, which is why you should definitely be talking to us. Secondly, 79% of the drives sold today are nearline or very high capacity. Although within 2 years, you can see that almost the entire market will move to, from hard disk drive perspective, to a very high capacity nearline kind of drive, 18, 20, 22 TB kind of drives, which only means that the smaller capacity hard disk drives will be extinct from the market. Any which ways you will have to move to an SSD drive. There is no other way out. There are only 3 major players out here in hard disk drive, and it will be very difficult for them to create those kind of smaller capacity hard disk drive because their margins any which ways will be shrinking. There will be a lot of competition, and the market only will remain almost 7%, or I mean, in 2024 itself, just 10% of the market, which is why you will any which ways have to move to an SSD drive unless you are utilizing 18, 20 kind of terabyte drives, for which also we have a plan. And sooner or later, we'll be coming up with a next year only with a 60 terabyte kind of drive, wherein we will allow you to consolidate much more data than you will be able to do on a hard disk drive. Now, on that note only, again, I initially highlighted that just one drive you should remember from my presentation, 7450, the latest Gen 4 NVMe SSD that we had launched. This is compatible with a Gen 3 slot as well. So in case you have a server which is having a Gen 3 slot only, same drive will work. And again, the advantage that you will get by putting a 7450 in a Gen 3 slot also is very good. That let me highlight that. Initially, we had our value NVMe, or what we call as our mainstream drive 7300. Later on, we upgraded to 7400, and then we moved on to fourth generation 7450 with 176 layer 3D NAND. This had lesser layer of 3D NAND, not that cost competitive, which is why we moved to the latest drive. 9300, which was launched at the same time at 7300, both were Gen 3 drives. Once you put a 7450 into a slot which is Gen 3, it will not perform like a value drive 7300. It will perform more like a 9300 drive. And that is the advantage which we will be able to bring out to you, and all other permutation combination, which drive will make much more sense for you in which kind of environment when Gen 5 will be coming. What kind of endurance level will make more sense to you, that all we will be able to help you. And we want to be your partner in your data center transformation journey. And from a mode of engagement perspective, even in case you are buying it from a tier 1 server like vendor HP or Dell or Lenovo as well, we would like to be your trusted partner, and you can engage with us the same way you are engaging with a processor vendor. In case you are able to go ahead than that, then there are multiple modes any which ways we can engage with you. But we are happy to engage with you as a trusted partner as well. If there are any questions, I can take, or that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.